Yo, I wanted to react to this live. I was listening to it at work before I just got home, and I think we need to watch this. For one, I think Donald Trump has been a blessing to people, not for what he's doing, but for the reality of things. The first time when he got elected, our people's oh racism doesn't exist, or even other people this and that. And then you see how many rednecks is coming out the woodworks. Okay, they literally raided the White House when he did. Okay, now all this is going on for this time. Now it's on the Latinos. When y'all thought y'all was white, right? They let you know a little bit, but you're not white like that. You feel me? Um, I'm laughing because people really live in delusions of this country and of this world. So if it had to take Donald to do it, then it had to take Donald to do it for people to open their eyes. I think Black Americans, Indigenous Americans have gotten a bad rep, and I think we are finally having some camaraderie. We are finally saying this is our culture. We are finally getting into that mode. I gotta put this up. This is because she reminded me of old girl from Malcolm X. If she was like, Malcolm, do you think all white people are devils? Head ass. All right, come on, let's look. Let's check this out. We gonna react.
A lot that Western civilization is the pinnacle of human progress, reason, and morality. But that's propaganda talking. I spent the first 21 years of my life fully indoctrinated in Christian conservatism.
How old are you now? Because your age like Mayo. That's open. So how old is you now? Okay. How old are you? It took that many years for you to realize that it's all been a lie. I doubt that. You know, blue is a color of like blue screens, green screens, deception. Anyways, let's go.
Which I now realize is the cultural foundation.
And that shit looks like a wig on her head. I ain't gonna hold you. I never knew white women used to they put extra white women wear weave too. I'm just saying they do it.
For the empire that is the United States. Deconstructing Christianity and colonization is a never ending journey.
Because you never picked up YouTube in your 21 years. Or, never heard a black person saying talking about the system. Like, come on, y'all want to believe us now? That is insane.
And yes, they go hand in hand. But we all have to start somewhere because we all have a part to play in building a better, more equitable future. And that's going to have to start.
We all have a part. No, you got a part to play. Pay us. What are you talking about? It took Donald Trump because I know you hate your dad because your dad hates you. I mean, if it ain't a black person getting killed in a horror movie, it's a white girl. I mean, things are changing now, but come on.
With debunking the idea that we were ever the supreme civilization in the first place.
You knew you wasn't. Look at you. You got the bad end of the genetic stick all around. Pineal gland look like a bunion pinky toe. Shit is calloused.
Welcome back to the Casey Malone Show. My name is Casey Malone, and I'm so glad you're here. The term Western civilization gets thrown around a lot, like it's some unbroken concept of rationality, democracy, and progress. You've probably seen it in school curriculums, YouTube explainer videos, or more recently in political speeches. This tidy narrative that links ancient Greece to Rome, then to the Enlightenment, and finally to the United States, as though the moral arc of human history just naturally culminated in a Starbucks on every corner and the United States military patrolling half of the globe.
Yeah, Greek just came out of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? They just came out of nowhere and start making civilization, right?
But that is not history accurately. That is a narrative that is just marketing, and Western civilization is not a neutral, objective, or even positive concept.
This is crazy because you probably want to, you know what I mean, fight for, you know what I mean, your lesbian lover and abortions. So now you coming out, oh, Western civilization. What does Western mean, Bridget? What the fuck your name is? Tammy Lee? Tammy Lynn? What is West? I mean, white. White.
It's a kind of branding, carefully constructed to uphold a myth of
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Cultural supremacy. Now, before we
Man, yo, should I put in my cat? I need to make a cash app. Should I put it in so I can hook me up so we get the YouTube whoop? Come on.
get too far into this, Western civilization has traditionally included both the United States and the majority of European countries, though now, under the current United States administration, a lot of European countries are understandably wanting to distance themselves from association with said current administration. And I totally get that. But unfortunately, for the concepts that I'm talking about in this segment, I am going to be using Western civilization to include European countries because we practiced the same colonization, is really what the point is.
We're all cave dwelling demons by nature. We can change though. I promise.
The narrative we're handed goes like this: democracy was born in Athens, then went to Rome, then it was preserved through European Christendom, reborn in the Enlightenment and the Scientific Revolution, and finally reaches its full expression in modern Western democracies like the United States. That's exactly what I was taught in the evangelical fundamentalist Christian high school I attended.
What made you make this video, Maloney? Because you look like pale baloney.
But this is a carefully edited and intentionally edited story that leaves out most of humanity's contributions and whitewashes the parts of history that don't fit
White dirty. Let's call it white dirties. Let's do that. Dirtying up history. Sea foam is the trash of the sea, and that's what made up Aphrodite in Greece. Dirty.
that script, that idea. This concept of Western civilization frames history as a straight line, linear path from from Plato to NATO or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, erasing entire cultures and peoples along the way. Not that I'm a huge fan of everything NATO does, but you get the point. So let's go back to Egypt as an example of ancient history that is kind of just brushed aside because it doesn't really fit in.
I love how she's saying Egypt when that's a Greek word. Why don't you say the real name? Hmm? Baloney Maloney? Why won't you say it? You're still practicing the crackolization of civilization. Call it Kemet, okay? Black land, where chemistry came from. Call it Talmudi, the land of love, where Mary and them was really from. Call it what it really was called instead of using the Western civilization terms.
To the mainstream Western civilization's historical narrative. Ancient Egypt was much more than what it is usually painted as in most United States public education systems. We are taught that it was just like a civilization of, like there were pyramids, there were pharaohs.
White pharaohs, let's say that. Can we start saying what really happened? Yeah, painting the faces of African kings in your movies and your cartoons and everything you do. You still don't want to say they black. I wonder why.
That's it. There, this was also the place where the ancient Israelites were slaves in that one story in the Bible. That's it. But the reality is, it was also a hub of very advanced science, mathematics, and medicine. In fact,
Then right, the first doctor, who's Emotep, which is ironic to make him an evil figure in the movie The Mummy, is the father of medicine. And I find it ironic, even in geometry, the Pythagoras the Pythagorean theorem is named after Pythagoras, but who made the pyramids? If that's based for the formula to find the spaces out of a triangle, you know what I mean?
there's a lot that we still don't know about how advanced, how civilized that society actually was. But what
What is it, base times height or something like that? Divided by one of them.
we do know tells us that long before the Greeks, Egyptians had developed concepts of geometry, surgical tools, solar calendars, and in fact, many of the Greek philosophers.
They also made the condom. Fun fact. Also, did y'all see the bottom of them pyramids? They got the bottom of the pyramids got them. What's that? 8 Pillars at the bottom. How did they put that down there?
we revere and hold up today, like Pythagoras and Plato, traveled to Egypt to study. But modern studies in Western civilization rarely mention this because acknowledging that much of Greek thought was influenced by African civilization.
At least she finally said African instead of Middle Eastern. Egypt is in Africa. The pale people you see there are Turkish descent. Muhammad Ali, the one before our Muhammad Ali.
Kind of complicates the neat little story of European intellectual superiority. And the same goes for the African empires of Mali, Songhai, and Ethiopia. These were
Okay, you cooking. It took you this long. Thanks, Uncle Trump. Yeah. Now, hey, I'm just happy it's a pale face that's saying this, even though she's still holding on to the Masonic order to keep secrets. Like, just say what it is. It's nah, that ain't even sound right. Calling her that.
sophisticated states with complex systems of governance, education, and trade, and these are just a few of many that I'm naming. Timbuktu, actually, often used as a metaphor
Timbuktu.
for remoteness, was actually one of the most important intellectual centers in the world during the 14th and 15th centuries.
You should say is like the first college or the second. The first may be in Morocco. Some scholars, some say Timbuktu. You can say the only college in the world or the first one.
It was a central trading post on the Trans Saharan caravan route. Its libraries held tens of thousands of manuscripts
At the caravan route as a trans-Saharan slave trade where Westerners got their boats from the Moors.
on astronomy, medicine, law, and theology, many written in Arabic, some in indigenous languages. But you don't hear about Mali or Songhai when people talk about the roots of civilization, even though the study of evolution
I think they all were written in Arabic because a lot of indigenous languages were written down unless it was spiritual notification due to many things, wars, sieges, protection of secrets, things like that.
actually traces all of our genetics back to Africa. And all of
That's why when people say go back to Africa, you should just say you go back to Africa. Yeah, bitch.
that is because
Fun fact: everyone that is not of complete African descent has Neanderthal DNA in them. Neanderthal DNA. Remember back in the day when Neanderthals used to be stupid, then over the years after they conquered the human genome, but they still have Africa has at least information on on genetic sites. Uh, they used to say it was too hot, but now it comes to find out it's just they just were racist. Well, it comes to find out this is deeper. There's some secrets there. Also, DNA testing is illegal in Israel.
the word civilization in Western usage has always been kind of racially coded. Indigenous
Say what it is. It has been.
governance systems in the Americas were also, by the way, complex and democratic. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, operated under a
Hadishona. Yeah, I don't think Iroquois is even their name again. Shona, I know that's an African word. Shona civilization.
more sophisticated model of federalism long before the United States Constitution was written. In fact, some of the founding fathers, including Benjamin Franklin, and I learned this specifically when researching for this segment, openly admired and borrowed ideas from indigenous political structures. But instead of crediting those systems, of course, the United States positioned Native people as savages in need of civilizing. Their knowledge systems, their contributions to political thought, their
She keeps saying there, there, there. You mean we? You're a part of that structure. Okay, Mickey Blue Eyes? You look like Donald with a mullet.
ecological wisdom all erased. Western canon wanted nothing to do with it. And that also makes me bring up the East. Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist philosophies go back thousands of years, And they do offer deep insights into consciousness,
Also, where the swastika come from, it was actually clockwise and it was a solar symbol. So you Aryans is really Indians?
ethics, and the nature of reality. The Upanishads contain philosophical and metaphysical discourses that rival anything written in the rest, especially the Bible. You've got to be kidding me.
Upanishads, aren't they Muslim?
Buddhist logic schools develop system of debate and epistemology that mirror Western rationalism, but we weren't really taught that.
Let me guess. You're thinking about going to therapy. And as a therapist myself, of course I'm going to say that's a great idea.
Were we? These traditions shape
I might have to go to therapy. No, Toma, I like brains.
entire civilizations, but they rarely appear in world history textbooks in the United States unless they're framed as spiritual or mystical rather than intellectual. And we all know how the West loves to promote rationalism over intuition, and that's worked out so well. Edward Said's foundational work called Orientalism, which I haven't read in full, but I know of and read a few summaries for this segment. This work makes it clear. He argues that the West only truly defined itself by inventing its opposite, aka the East. Europe constructed the Orient as exotic, irrational, and inferior, so it could see itself as rational, free, and civilized. And this binary specifically emerged from empire. By the way, empire is quite adept at manufacturing distinctions amongst people and creating divisions so that binaries can exist. So, as Europe expanded through colonization, it needed a story or a narrative that justified its domination so that people could consent to this domination. And so it told one that it was the bearer of enlightenment and order in a chaotic, backward world. The myth of Western civilization still lingers today in every conversation that positions the Western
They do this still today. Stop resisting. You got them gaffed up. Who's the savage? You know what I mean? Iran, you need to end this war. You the one that bombed them. What are you talking about? Like reverse psychology is a mother sucker.
world as a beacon of liberty, and everyone else is catching up. So, when we talk about Western civilization, what we're really talking about is a curated version of history that selectively includes whatever makes Europe and later the United States look like the natural leaders of humanity. It's not that
We all know that, and you been knew that. You just mad your uncle's in office.
Greek philosophy or the Enlightenment weren't important. It's that they didn't develop in a vacuum. They weren't inevitable. They were deeply interwoven with and often directly borrowed from other cultures that were later dismissed as primitive or underdeveloped. And the worst part of this is the West didn't necessarily just ignore
Every time she say West, just in your mind, just say white people, because they gonna put a direction to, you know what I mean, divert blame like they always do. Like Africans sold themselves. Oh, is Africa a country?
these other knowledge systems or cultures, it actively erased them. Colonizers have burned libraries, okay? Not just military bases, libraries, not to mention hospitals and civilians.
You definitely knew that all your fucking life. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? You know you knew that. What you just found out? You just read some of them books behind you.
Missionaries have intentionally and systematically destroyed temples and sacred texts. Entire languages and oral histories were
Are sitting under the Vatican and the American Smithsonian
wiped out in the name of civilization. This
in the name of white civilization. She's scared to put it like she's not white or something.
was an active intellectual colonization, and it is why colonization has such a stronghold in the minds of all of us to this day. European scholars claimed the mantle of universal knowledge while portraying the rest of the world as its raw material where it gets its inspiration, but not its actual manifestation of intellectualism. And this intellectual theft still shapes our world. It still affects all of us. It affects what's taught in schools, who gets published, whose voices seem as authoritative and whose seem as fringe or extreme. It defines the boundaries of credible philosophy and real science, and it reinforces a worldview in which Western institutions
So basically, you pissed off because your narrative is being flipped on his head. It got to be. It got to be. What are you talking now? Out of nowhere, you just know about what's going on. Like, there's got to be a link to be a democratic message.
Are the default objective, neutral, advanced, while everyone else is seen as derivative, emotional, or spiritual. When people say the West is more advanced, more rational, or more civilized, they're not stating a fact, they're regurgitating propaganda. Western civilization is not a civilization. It's a story, a narrative, a
It's a lie. Yes. 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 It's a fucking lie. All right.
brand, a story that justifies empire and cultural erasure. And it's time we stop telling it uncritically without really questioning it. Because the real history of human progress is far more global, collaborative, and interconnected than the myth allows. And when we recognize that, we open ourselves up to a far richer understanding of who we are and who we could become. One of the most persistent lies in the myth of Western supremacy is that the West, and particularly Christianity, is somehow responsible for modern scientific advancement. We're taught that without the guiding hand of Christianity, the
What she's saying that she gotta hate God. I'm not even Christian. You can smell that.
world would still be in the dark ages. But history tells a very different story. The Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, often held up as pinnacles of
Black people, specifically Muslims.
Western intellectual achievement, did not emerge because of the church. Let's be so fucking for
Zidiab or Crow, the Moor from Iran. Some say he was a slave. I don't know why there's always a black man somewhere. These Arabs gotta say he was a slave or something. It's like sort of to Lukman. Anyways, he made the idea of having, oh, we already did this oh here on Freedom Boulevard, but just a recap, he basically brought civilization to Spain, which basically spread all the way up to Europe. 3 meal plans, winter, summer clothing, music.
real. They emerged in opposition to it. And much of the foundational knowledge that powered these so called Western breakthroughs didn't originate in Europe at all. It was inherited, borrowed, or stolen from other civilizations, particularly the Islamic world, South Asia.
Notice how she says the Islamic world. Why don't you say the name of these people that they were called? They were called Moors. Okay, they all were Muslim, some were Christian, but they were called Moors that brought technology and a lot of things. Like in Spanish, what is have al that comes from Arabic, or camisa is camis. You know what I'm saying? Moors brought that up there. Why you not talking about that and how the Moors affected Western civilization? Won't you talk about how Morocco was the first one to recognize America as a sovereign entity? You still racist. You just mad that Trump about to take away your marriage license.
And East Asia. Let's start with the tension between Christianity and early science, which
No, she didn't say none about first. She want to give Africa credit in ancient Egypt. What are you talking about? How about uh current era Africa, West Africa to be exact? Just like how you said the Mali Empire, things like that. These wasn't too far away from the Muslims that went up into Spain. Umayyad, I believe,
just
or was it a Fatimid?
still very prominent to this day. Let's remember that the Catholic Church has never been known for nurturing scientific inquiry. It's not out of left field to recognize that it has rather spent a fuck ton of time and energy
Ooh, she throwing in some curses. Okay, Capit Mancha, Capit Mancha.
actively suppressing it. The church maintained a monopoly on knowledge for so long and punished deviation pretty fucking harshly. Scientific progress didn't flourish under Christianity. It had to fight its way through it via visionaries like Galileo and Bruno. Meanwhile, while Europe was slowly crawling out of the intellectual stranglehold of the church, the Islamic world was already thriving in what's now known as the Islamic Golden Age, spanning roughly the 8th to the 14th centuries.
711 to 1492 is when the Moors were in Europe spreading science medicines, culture, music. The Germanic tribes of Spain, yes, they are Germanic tribes. So in Spanish, people say they're Spanish, they're repping white people, gargoyles, dungeons for churches, caves, destruction, vandalism. Vandals is actually a Germanic tribe from Spain. The term Gothic, I know on the East Coast, I'm not sure too much in the West. I know East Coast growing up, there was a lot of centralistic or Hispanic Goths. You know what I'm saying? It's. And I mean, they probably like the second biggest population of the Gothics. You know, they got the Ostrogoths, you know, the Visigoths, East and West. Gothic. You know what I mean? Whatever came from Gothic.
During this time, Muslim scholars and scientists were building libraries, translating Greek and Persian texts, and producing groundbreaking original work in every field from mathematics to medicine. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became a renowned center of learning and innovation. It was a research institute, a translation
She's not putting years on things for. She's still being divisive.
hub, and it was almost also kind of like a think tank all rolled into one. And this is important because we are constantly getting the message here in the United States about how when you compare the religion of Islam with the religion of Christianity, it's supposedly obvious how backwards and unprogressive and even violent Islam is in comparison with the more modernized, civilized, and even
Would you be happy if you stayed where you are in life and job forever? If the answer is yes, then this video is not.
moral faith system of Christianity. But as many of you know, I will never stand for the idea of any patriarchal Abrahamic religion to be better than any other. Just a few hundred years ago, the argument about which religion was more violent, oppressive, and uncivilized would easily have gone to Christianity. But then, Western empires like Britain, France, etc., started systematically using whatever iterations of Christianity suited them to further expand their colonialism.
Which is why they had different Bibles. I know that we were saying there's so many different Bibles. They literally had Bibles that they took stuff out for slavery. And the slaves that did read the Bible, they used to take them out so they wouldn't get inspired to uprise.
And imperialism throughout the rest of the goddamn world. After they spent centuries fighting and
We. She keeps trying to exclude herself from that. Come on, Slowfig. You but look like you about to burn up in that light you got. That ring light hot, ain't it?
incredibly bloody internal wars about Catholicism versus Protestantism versus Anglicanism or whatever. As a result, societies that have been non Christian for a long ass time are understandably resistant to the idea of a global Christendom. I will never be a supporter of religious fundamentalism or religious authoritarianism or religious
See? Yes. You hate God. You are your own God. Vagina monologue.
extremism of any faith, but to suggest that in the grand scheme of human history, any specific patriarchal Abrahamic religion is any better or worse than one of the others, that's bullshit. They are all so harmful, and frankly, we could do without the lot of them.
They're all so harmful, but you just said how much Islam, what you said, the Muslim world affected Europe. See this fuck shit that she's doing? It's so harmful, but the modern world is based off of Muslim scholars. What are you talking about? Most of the stars in the sky is Arabic names. I wonder why.
And that's not to say that everyday practitioners of faith based systems are
Not only that, but also countries basing things off of Sharia.
inherently violent.
Not to mention divorce. I know you like that. A man's abusing you. That's not in no other book but the Quran. Okay? Shetatina.
Or unwell. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing that there shouldn't be the freedom to practice whatever religion you want. Of
You just said that they're all so dangerous. What the fuck are you talking about? You said you want to drop bombs and shit. What are you talking about, dumbass?
course, there should be. I'm not trying to suggest that good things have never come out of religious environments. But what we're often hearing in the United States, even amongst the atheist community in which I participate, is that some
She's an atheist. Now that's dumb. You are the dumbest, most narcissistic type of person. How can you think there's no God? That's one, two, three. That's ABC. What do you believe in? Because the Big Bang is a theory. Evolution is a theory. Marriage comes from scripture.
Somehow, Christianity has on the whole been less harmful as Islam and has produced more positive results for the progress of humankind. But this is not
It's actually the opposite. Islam has brought it's mankind to the next level.
true, and it's a narrative that is deliberately intended to indoctrinate us
Your narrative is deliberately intended not to talk about the black Muslims that changed the world and continue to do so today.
into thinking that other cultures, other religions, other peoples throughout the world deserve our quote unquote civilizing efforts. You know, through war. But I digress. Let's look at something
And it ain't just war. Tell you that. Different levels of war, you know? Through your diseases too. Yeah, I ain't know that if you could sneeze on an indigenous person and we had just dropped. Yeah, I ain't know that at first.
examples of ways that
When y'all found out that y'all was filthy, I used it as a weapon. You know, that's the first bio weapon was from Western civilization. Come on now.
the progress of human science and achievement has actually been
And they still making diseases.
more global in efforts and not so much concentrated within the powers of a few famous white scientists. Consider, and please excuse all of my pronunciations here, Al-Khwarizmi, who gave us the word algorithm. He systematized algebra and wrote foundational texts that introduced Hindu
Islam is so terrible, dangerous. Okay. You're literally here online due to this Muslim brother.
Arabic numerals to the Western world. There's also Ibn al-Haytham,
Arabic numerals, yes. And algebra, yes. Yes. Romans couldn't really count like that because that's why their numbers was a whole sentence to say a birth date. They were dunce.
who wrote the Book of Optics, establishing the scientific method centuries before Francis Bacon. He
I didn't even know that part.
conducted controlled experiments with light and vision, laying the groundwork for modern physics and optics. Then there's Avicenna, who wrote the Canon of Medicine, a text that became standard reading in European medical schools for centuries. He outlined treatments for numerous diseases, surgical procedures, and diagnostic techniques that were far more advanced than anything happening in Christian Europe at
Why don't you say where they from in the years these happened?
the time. And outside of the Islamic world in China, scholars had already developed the printing press centuries before the Gutenberg press, and I should not have been an adult when I learned that. They invented paper, gunpowder, the compass, and seismographs. Chinese astronomers charted comets and eclipses with extraordinary precision. Their civil service exam
Very smart culture, very intellectual. And for you saying that, oh, when that's just bullshit.
exams required a deep understanding of mathematics, ethics, and governance centuries before such ideas caught on in the West. In India, the concept of zero had already been developed by the 5th century CE.
5th century CE. Are you sure about that? Was it the 6th century or the 7th? Was it the 5th? I could have sworn zero was made by Muslims also. I believe it was said there was a lot of camels running, and you know how mirages reflect. The camels was running all together as a hadith, and then Prophet Muhammad or one of the Sahabas, peace be upon them, they came up with the idea of zero or nothingness. That there were so many that there were none.
A revolutionary idea that underpins all modern computing. No big deal. Indian mathematicians contributed to trigonometry, calculus, and infinite series, which is a thing.
Infinite, yeah, they probably did that when it was Hindus, but a lot of this mathematics stuff is from Muslim Indians.
That I learned one time in calculus. And in the realm of language and logic, Panini's ancient Sanskrit grammar laid the foundations for linguistic theory, arguably making him the world's first formal linguist. All of this knowledge made its way to Europe through trade, contracts, and sometimes peaceful cultural exchange. The Crusades, for all their brutality, did open up contact between the Islamic world and Christendom. European scholars began
Shouldn't mention that in the Crusades, Muslims only attacked the men. They also gave mercy, and also protection to a lot of Jews. Okay, a lot of that brutality was actually from the Templars. Watch that movie Kingdom of God with Orlando Bloom. Okay, these people are just such liars. Like even Orlando Bloom, when he came out, he was like faking to be Australian or some shit. And come to find out he like from Ohio. I don't know, somewhere like that. But like, look, this is divisive knowledge, half truths fitting her narrative.
translating Arabic texts into Latin, often without crediting the original authors. It's through this process that the so called Western Enlightenment was born. European thinkers stood on the shoulders of global geniuses,
Moors, Moors. Okay,
rarely
they ain't had no trade from India to fucking Spain and 7-Eleven. That trade would have to been the Muslims. Okay, long, long ago.
acknowledged them. It wasn't a birth of knowledge, it was a conglomerate.
Also, look up Saint Caspar from Germany, a Moor. A lot of these people's a mixed in bloodline, like they say, 3 generations, you could turn the black blood into white. You know what I'm saying? All these names, a lot of these heraldry. You see an Afro, a black person, then they say, oh, it's because they had slaves. They're always trying to put something on slavery.
Admiration of it. And once that transfer was complete, Western historians whitewashed the original story to make it look indigenous to their culture. That's not to say Europe made no contributions, but the idea that the West generated science independently from first principles out of sheer brilliance and Christian fucking virtue is laughably false.
You need to chill out because I'm tired of cursing myself. I really just started back up when your uncle bombed Iran. But it's like she tells one truth with 1,000 lies. A true definition of a shetatin.
This matters because it challenges the core of the Western supremacy myth. If science, the prized emblem of Western modernity, wasn't purely Western, then what else have we misunderstood? What other narratives and messages have we been told that we should be questioning? Is there anything that makes us better, actually, than the rest of the world? Is there any
You're the worst. At least she's finally saying us now.
core fundamental reason we should be putting America first? When people point to the scientific achievements of the West as evidence of
Of the whites.
cultural or moral superiority, we have to push back because the roots of science are not nation based, they're not Christian, they're not Western, they are global, they are collaborative, and they are the results of thousands of years of shared human curiosity. The real story of science isn't a linear journey all the way to NASA. It is a vast, messy, multicultural tapestry of ideas, exchanges, and breakthroughs that no one civilization can lay claim as their own. The idea that the West is uniquely rational, democratic, or moral, which is a key one, is one of the most powerful and dangerous myths in modern history. It's the ideological scaffolding that props up everything from foreign intervention to economic exploitation to white supremacy. This belief that Western civilization represents the pinnacle of reasoned and ethical governance does more than just distort history. It
At least her little LGBT self is talking about white supremacy. I know this is getting out to some people, but you always got to say, "Oh, the Muslim world isn't it?" Moors. Also, don't mention you forgot to mention how they got those European uh, adventurers, privateers. They got them across the ocean. There have always been Moors around, which is why a lot of people don't want to affiliate themselves with Moors because they did have slaves. They did have business with Europe, and I wasn't there. I don't know exactly how that went down, but Moors navigated those demons over here.
It enables ongoing violence by disguising it as benevolence. It says things like, we're bringing these other people liberation and civilization. We're told that Western societies are more enlightened, more logical, and more just. But if you actually trace what the West has done with its supposed rationality, let's be real. You'll find a legacy soaked in blood, control, war, colonialism, genocide, and the list goes on. The unfortunate truth that we are not taught in elementary school is that all of this was very much intentional. We are talking about genocidal colonization.
Bitch, that's not. I mean, sorry, Trish. That's not something for elementary students to learn. Middle school, yeah. Elementary, come on. What are you talking about?
European empires didn't just stumble into domination. They didn't manifest it because they happened to be better. They planned it. They mapped, measured, and cataloged the lands they would take and the people they would destroy. The civilizing mission was framed as a rational moral duty or responsibility, but in practice, it meant cultural erasure, economic exploitation, and again, mass death. From the Congo Free State under King Leopold II to the forced assimilation of indigenous children in North American residential schools, Western imperialism has time and again carried
White, white imperialism, white Caucasians, white Neanderthal, white civilization.
out systematic, calculated violence in the name of order and progress. Then came the World Wars. Far from being proof of the moral maturity or diplomatic excellence that we claim, the 20th century showed just how deeply the West was willing to descend into fucking madness. Two world wars, launched and fought by the most civilized nations on Earth, resulted in the deaths of over 100 million people. These wars weren't fought by supposedly backward societies, by the way. They were waged by the supposed centers of European power, fueled by nationalist ideologies,
The League of Nations had to come back as the United Nations because white people couldn't stop killing. Know that.
imperial rivalries, and economic interests. All of the things that those same nations claim Middle Eastern countries are at fault for. And it was Western science, by the way, that created the most devastating weapon in human history, the atomic bomb. The bombing
That's right. Mind you, after those wars, they took the Nazi scientists and gave them immunity and reparations and land and jobs, and NASA. Nazi.
of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not a moral
Also, Japanese got reparations for Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
failing of religion, by the way. It was a rational strategic decision by a democratic government using the best minds of Western science to incinerate civilians, and then the religion of imperialism here in the United States being
The religion of white supremacy.
Christianity found a way to fucking justify it. Even after the dust
Found a way to fucking it's just Adam 22, sister.
of global war settled, the violence has never stopped. It has just evolved. Today, Western
It's like slavery has never stopped, it has just evolved.
nationalism shows up as global surveillance capitalism. There's a reason for everything, right? A system like this commodifies attention, it manipulates our
Capitalism, which is born out of racism. Okay. Now, you wouldn't have this capitalism or this Zionist banking if you follow Sharia banking. You know what I mean? For all that interest and keep you in financial slavery.
behavior, and it is mining human data at a scale previously unimaginable. Tech companies headquartered in Silicon Valley, hailed as beacons of innovation, have built digital empires that harvest the thoughts, movements, desires, and energy of billions of people. These systems are, guess what? Rational, they're logical, they're profitable, and they're incredibly efficient. But they are also invasive and exploitative and deeply undemocratic.
And who is the most monitored on the face of the earth?
In many ways, modern capitalism is where the myth of Western supremacy and its rationalism reaches its final form, at least I hope so. Seamless control disguised as convenience. And let's not forget the history of scientific racism, which is something I try to remind people of all the time.
That is a fact. Science is also a religion. For so long, people thought the most intellectual person with the biggest cranium was it the Piltdown Man of England or something like that. You many generations later, you find out that was bullshit. You know,
This is a direct product
that's why you can't even trust. You can't trust nothing. You know, lie so much you don't know what's real.
of Enlightenment Europe. The same period that produced talk of liberty and natural rights also gave birth to eugenics and theories of racial hierarchy. Enlightenment era thinkers categorized people into racial types and
Eugenics, that's like killing certain types of people. Or is that no, is that breeding certain types?
ranked them by intelligence, morality, and capacity for civilization. These ideas were not for the fringe extremists, they were mainstream. They were taught in universities, cited in court decisions, and used to justify slavery, colonization, and segregation.
That's a fact. That is a fact. I don't know if y'all, but I've read the whole Bible at least one time when I was trying to, look at, like I said, compared to cosmology. 'Cause I do think the Israelite brothers, they know the Bible, but they also, what I mean, they play with change it for their narrative. But I mean, I was thinking about it. That book will make you racist, straight up. Even the most purest form of it as a racist book.
And a lot of these pseudoscientific ideas have continued well into the 20th century and have quietly resurfaced today under the banner of genetics and biology. Now, I'm about as anti establishment as a person can get, but if I had to
No, you're not. No, the fuck you're not. You are a white woman in America. You are not as anti-establishment as a person can get. You're not even saying it was black people in Spain.
choose any human made institution we should be looking to for guidance, I would have hoped it would be the academic one. And yet, because we're, well, human, even that establishment has a track record of imperfection, which I think is important to recognize. This is the core contradiction at the heart of Western self image. The same societies that claim to be champions of reasoned and human dignity have also led the world in organized mass violence, environmental destruction, systemic dehumanization, and state funded genocides.
If that don't sound like Satan, then I don't know what is. If none of this was real, if no scripture was real, and you're a dumb, blonde, atheist, unstable creature like this one right here, what would be the closest thing to Satan? And what would be the closest thing to a persecuted prophet? What would it be? Who would they be? Where would they be from?
And rather than reckon with that contradiction, the myth of Western rationalism has simply reframed the atrocities. Again, this goes back to rebranding. Everything is justified in the name of stability, security, or progress. Frantz Fanon once said Europe is literally the creation of the third world. What he meant is that the wealth, power, and institutions of the West were
Yeah, drain the whole world, digging and drilling everywhere, draining up rivers, all the gold, like Yat Juj, Wamat Juj, the wild tribes, and Surat Kaf.
built through the extraction of labor and resources from colonized people. The very framework of Western democracy and capitalism was underwritten by the suffering of those deemed less rational, less civilized, and less human. So the next time someone tells you that the West is more logical, more moral, or more advanced, ask them to explain how that squares with genocide, slavery, and nuclear war. Ask them why so much Western progress looks like
Shout out to my zero viewers. Then yo, you gotta be on YouTube like an MF on here. You heard? I really was trying to put that radio thing up there. I used to see that maybe 8 people jump in, jump out. My bad, y'all.
exploitation. And then, and here's the kicker, ask them who actually benefited from all of that supposed rationality. Because if the answer isn't something along the lines of most, if not all of us, then maybe it's time we start building something different,
Most of all of who?
something more humane, and guess what? Truly rational. Not just for the few, but for all. Now let's talk about how Christianity is a part of this
You rational, but you think everything is here out of nowhere. And you just said how dangerous Islam was, but everything you mentioned is from Muslims.
conversation. I talked about Christian morality in more depth in my last segment, so I'm not going to get in too much details here. But Christianity is propped up as the ultimate way of life for everyday people in this country and in Western civilization to live good, wholesome, moral, productive lives. And this might be difficult for more progressive Christians to swallow, but it is so important. Christianity, in any way, shape, or form, in any denomination, in any iteration of your progressive version of it, is a tool of empire. It is the language of
White supremacy. Okay? Let's not get off that, Becky Sue. All right? Beavis and Butthead. Tippy! Tippy for my bunghole! Bunghole yo!
the oppressor. The point of decolonizing our ways of thinking
The oppressor is your daddy.
is to stop letting people in power trick you into thinking that the answers to your problems lie outside of yourself in the form of any kind of savior. You are your answer. You are your savior. Any mental gymnastics you perform to keep justifying a patriarchal Abrahamic religious narrative is just propaganda. I'm not trying
What you're spending is saying here is propaganda. You just singled out billions of people in the world saying that they have never been right about anything. You basically just shat on all the civilization that Europe has that was passed down to them from the Moors and the ancient Kemetic peoples. You basically just said, hey, this is all the good stuff, but it's really bad, and men are evil, and like, what are you talking about? You can only do this shit now because of technology. If there was no technology, no guns, stuff like that, you wouldn't be saying none of this at all. You would be praying for a patriarchal Abrahamic religion to protect you. Okay? Let's not forget how barbaric Europeans are, that you basically just submitted to us. All right? We see how great the Dark Ages went.
to be mean. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying you're a stupid person. I spent two-thirds of
You are saying people are stupid because you just said Abrahamic religions are stupid. See the double play? Can't trust these crackers. Oh, my mama, mama.
my life as an evangelical Christian. I get it. But even if you don't want to give up your faith, we have got to recognize that Christianity has functioned as the cultural machinery of conquest. Wherever colonizers went,
And that whole spiel is the only thing she said right. And not to mention the Muslims after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he passed away, they just went straight haywire, which is why we needed a reformer, mujaddid. Okay,
missionaries followed, or more often, they went first. Their work was not neutral, and it certainly wasn't just about personal salvation. Missionary efforts were the ideological front line of imperial expansion. They were a means of softening
imperial expansion, white global supremacy.
resistance from indigenous peoples. They, in fact, dismantled indigenous belief systems and they introduced the social hierarchies needed
Indigenous meaning all non-white people.
to justify and maintain European control. Christian missionaries would show up with all of their supposed loving kindness, lull indigenous peoples into a relationship of trust. So then, when
They still trying to do this. They did very successful with this Samoans and Polynesians. You know, I'm not sorry. Y'all don't know shit, bro. It is crazy. Like y'all come here saying, yo, y'all literally just got the Bible, bro. Like that is crazy. And then these evil Westerners, they over there in India, over there, the Andaman Islands, yo, they're trying to bring that missionary shit over there. Them native black peoples of India, they said untouched from the beginning of time. Makes no sense. But they straight bow and arrowed them down. Like, what is you doing? Like, you know what I mean?
the military came later on, those peoples would be less likely to fight off the imperialism. And don't give me, well, that has nothing to do with Jesus. Jesus
And my bad. Shout out to Muslims. I'm just saying, like, it's a lot of they saints. It's a lot of Yo, like you try to talk to them, it's just straight indoctrination. Like, have you not heard of the whole rest of the world that these people took over? You go down there to some Pacific islands, their hierarchy and their kingdoms be from like German people, white people. You feel me? They be mixed bloods and all that, and their original people is always black, and then they get lighter and lighter, and then they come here and be racist. You know what I'm saying? Not so much in LA, but they are Samoans. You give them enough numbers when they roll in them packs, especially up there in the Pacific Northwest. They racist as fuck.
Would never. You're worshiping some guy. I respect that if it's so important to you and you consider it
She's a cockshunner. Worshiping some guy. Now it's true, you shouldn't be worshiping no creation. She got a point there. The way she's saying it's like you should be worshiping a woman. That's what it sounds like.
a part of your personal spiritual transformation, even though the internal psychological processes of spiritual growth and evolution are actually you invoking the power of bringing yourself peace and blessings, not an external force. If you want to call that
How do you bring yourself blessings? What is a blessing? These atheists, they still use words of Christianity. You feel me?
power, Jesus Christ, I want you to have that right. I will fight for your right to call that spiritual experience whatever the fuck you want to call it. But beyond your
Disrespectful. Disrespectful demon. Look at that blank stare. Look like a lizard. Lizard with a little Kim wig on.
individual experience on a systemic level, I don't think that's enough to erase the harm and violence that has been done in the name of Jesus Christ. I just don't. In Africa, Asia, and the Americas, missionary work was almost always bound with colonization. The goals of this work might have had some innocence behind it, but in large part, these efforts were social and cultural and political. Missionaries would enter a territory, study the local customs, and begin a systematic process of moral reprogramming.
Sneaky, sneaky. Mm-mm-mm. Thou shalt not sell the scriptures for thine own profit, benefit. Yeah.
Indigenous cosmologies were declared pagan or demonic. Ancestor veneration, animism, and polytheism were labeled as superstitions that had to be uprooted. Spirituality, which had often been deeply intertwined with environmental stewardship,
She's so against Abrahamic faith. But the person that killed the most human beings in modern history, Benito Mussolini, a fucking atheist. She forgot to say that.
and collective life was replaced with a rigid, male dominated theology that emphasized obedience, shame, and hierarchy. Again, if you're worshiping
These feminists is just as delusional as these illegal immigrants.
Jesus, you're just worshiping some guy. Christianity served and still serves as a way to enforce ideological conformity. It moralizes submission to authority. It literally preaches that you should have a servant's heart. It tells people that suffering is basically holy next to godliness, and it teaches that justice comes in the afterlife, not in this one. Does that not sound insanely convenient for the ruling class? And most insidiously, it taught us that we had to look outside of ourselves at some hero to save us. Because when we're looking at someone else to make things better for us in the here and now,
That's a fact. You give that person the power. Like I said, she makes one truth with 1,000 lies. I don't like this woman. I don't. But check her out. She be having some stuff for y'all. You know what I mean? Casey Maloney. Baloney. Phony.
we're not going to try and make things better on our own. We're not going to organize our communities. We're going to trust what our government says about our neighbor over trusting our neighbor. I am begging you to stop letting institutions brainwash you into thinking that you don't have the ability to save yourself from the mess that they made. Christianity has also historically framed resistance as a kind of sin, if you really think about it. Indigenous uprisings, worker strikes, feminist movements, all of these have been labeled as rebellions, not just against empire, but against God. And that is the genius of using
Seeing how she throwing feminism in there.
religion as a tool of empire. It doesn't just control the body,
White supremacy.
it controls the conscious, the mind. Today, when Christian nationalists in the United States call for the country to return to its biblical roots, they are echoing the same imperial theology.
When white people say make America great again.
They want to reinstate a moral order that has always been about power, not faith. When they say family values, they mean patriarchal authority. When they say religious freedom, they mean the freedom to dominate. It
What is she talking about? Patriarchal, like you are here due to patriarchal authority. Like you do know you come from savages. Like, you would not be here if it wasn't a man fighting another man over you. Like, let's be real.
It is up to us to recognize this language for what it is. Again, understanding Christianity's role as the cultural arm of empire means seeing it not as a personal belief system, but as a political technology.
As an arm for white supremacy, for global domination.
It was used to mold the conscience of the colonized, to undermine collective resistance, and to align entire
They say they brought Christianity into Africa and took all the gold. Everybody keeps saying Christianity is in Ethiopia. They never spread that shit nowhere. But the empire that they had, mind you, is a huge empire. But they didn't go out missionary, giving out, you know what I'm saying, medicine and drugs and then taking everything. Feel me?
societies with the values of empire: hierarchy, discipline, profit, and control. And again, while some individual Christians have resisted this legacy, standing on the side of liberation and justice, the institution of Christianity, as it has operated historically, cannot be separated from its role in conquest. So when someone says Christianity civilized the world, we have to ask what they mean by civilization.
And you have to reiterate that Islam civilized the world then,
Because if it looks like conversion, forced conversion, cultural erasure,
which is against Islam. No, there's no compulsion in Islam. Some people say Islam came conquering with a sword. They obviously wasn't following Al Islam. You can't make somebody turn Muslim. That's bullshit. Now, Constantine, your great uncle, that's a different story.
and child abuse, we should stop pretending it was ever a good thing. Christianity didn't civilize the world, it helped colonize it, and I stand by that. And its legacy still shapes how power operates today, from missionary aid organizations to Christian nationalist legislation. To build a just world, we've got to confront not just the empires of the past, but the moral systems that have made them possible, the cultural ideology behind them. Now, I recognize that Christianity has a large spectrum of political beliefs and educational backgrounds. I am an atheist, but I try very hard to advocate for the liberation of everyday Christians from the day to day struggles of living under a difficult society, as well as from the multi-million-dollar propaganda machine that works to keep them disempowered. I know there are
Billion.
good, kind Christians out there because I grew up next to you. I know that you have moral stances that I align with, but the algorithms that are fed to us by for profit billionaire CEOs
Algorithm.
have
Islam.
alienated us from each other. I am begging you to meet me in the middle here. I am begging you to wake up to the $1 trillion Israeli propaganda machine that is convincing you to support Israel's actions at all costs.
There go one truth with a thousand lies. She's failing to say that these white people that are in Palestine are using the same tactics. The same, exact same, which is why DNA testing is illegal.
Even genocidal costs.
Not that it will matter because there is no genetic marker for an Israelite, Hebrew. There's none. The only body that we know of that we have as a descendant of Abraham, peace be upon him, is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the only body that we have. And no, you're never gonna get it. Ironic.
I do not want to take away your right to worship however you want, but you are being manipulated into believing that your neighbors are trying to take things from you, like your jobs, your right to worship, your right to raise your kids however you want. It is not easy to come to terms with how manipulated the Christian church is in this country, how complicit the Christian church is in reinforcing harmful narratives that go right along with what the corporate billionaires want you to believe. It is not easy to question whether or not you've been lied to your entire life. In fact, I know exactly how easy it is to just accept that you happen to believe in the one true God. You happen to adhere to the one religion that has the only unique relationship with that which is divine through Jesus Christ. It is so much easier to feel aligned with righteousness when that form of righteousness claims to save you from an eternity of hellfire. But what you're not recognizing when you do that is how it results in your subconscious dehumanization of people who don't.
Oh, we got two viewers up here. Shout out to my two viewers. Okay, I'm showing my face. I'm talking now. You heard? I'm trying to show a little whoopie that wobble away. I'm talking about. We just looking at this cave woman honky lie and tell truths at the same damn time. She like quicker than the cat wink his eye.
Adhere to the same religion as you. And you're not recognizing that you're sacrificing your agency to determine for yourself what it means to be a moral person. Do you not question how such a belief system that is predicated on the idea of believers versus non believers, of people going to heaven for eternity versus people going to hell for eternity, sets up an internal psychological system that relies on your prejudices against those who are different from you? All I'm asking is for you to consider the possibility that you weren't taught the truth. People in power in this country would have you believe that you live in the greatest country in the world, but make no mistake.
I heard Sweden was pretty popping. I'm just saying, a lot of people in America, they don't know what's going on because the information that we get, people always act like, oh, it's free, this and that. No, they have things that's banned online that you can't see or things that's hard to find. A lot of the times, these books, there's they skyrocket talking about the Black Moors, you know what I mean? Or anything black, anything, Islamic. A lot of this stuff is skyrocketed for you to see truths in it or the bloody history of the West, which is just white.
What they mean is you live in the most capitalist country in the world, the most militarized. It is not the land of the free when we lead the world in the number of incarcerated people. It is not
We definitely lead the world in incarcerated people, and the biggest majority of that is our black people. We have the most prisons in the world, and the highest population is in California, unfortunately. Okay? Slavery is still here, and she needs to say what is really affected by this and the origin of it. Notice how she kept saying the Muslim world when these were black people. And notice how she's saying the detriment of society and what's it affecting, but she's not saying specifically who's it affecting. It's not her.
the home of the brave when the population fell prey to fear mongering and voted Donald Trump into office. It is
Bingo, that's what this is all about. She got all these secrets about Western white evil empire and all this. It's all about Trump. You knew this your whole life. Your daddy knew this. Your daddy knew this. This is why it was illegal to read, and some people have made a culture to not believe in, books or even go to the doctor. You are living due to the white patriarchal system that you claim that you are anti against. I wonder how many patriarchs wrote those books behind you.
It's time that we stop believing the myth that Western civilization and or the United States is somehow better than the rest of the world. The reality is, decolonizing knowledge and raising the collective consciousness is about recognizing that the world is far richer, more complex, and more interconnected than the myth of Western supremacy ever allowed. And it's about finally telling a story that includes all of us. I hope you enjoyed this segment outlining the violent hypocrisy of the United States just in time for July 4th.
Use a lie, but yeah, thank you, honky mistress, for at least giving your spiel and shedding some light on the information that is out there. Let me know what y'all think. Peace. Wait, hold on. Yeah, we out.